So I have the privilege to introduce Dr. Robert Ellis. Dr. Ellis is working as a hematologist-oncologist for Kaiser Permanente. He received his Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine from Chicago and his PhD in microbiology from Rosalind Franklin University of Health Sciences in Illinois. He is currently a clinical assistant professor of medicine for the Division of Medical Oncology at OHSU, an adjunct professor of medicine for the School of Osteopathic Medicine at the Pacific Northwest Lebanon, Oregon, an adjunct assistant professor of medicine, Department of Clinical Medicine, College of Osteopathic Medicine in Pacific Northwest University, and an adjunct assistant professor of medicine, osteopathic medicine in Arizona at the University of Mesa, Arizona. He belongs to numerous professional memberships, including and not limited to the American College of Professions, American College of Lifestyle Medicine, American College of Clinical Oncology, Society of Integrative Medicine, Natural Products Advisory Committee, Northwest Permanente Medical Group. He also served in the Army in active duty and retired, leaving the Army at a rank of colonel. His main interest is in holistic medicine of cancer, and he has a personal interest in cancer-fighting cooking and integrative medicine, which are programs that are all being created at Kaiser as we speak. Dr. Ellis brings years of experience, wealth of knowledge, and passion for his profession, and it is with my great honor that I invite you to help me to welcome Dr. Robert Ellis.
Now it's on? Okay. So I want to thank you for inviting me into your time and your precious space so that I could give you some of my thoughts. I am a second-generation osteopathic oncologist, which is very rare. My grandmother was an osteopath and an oncologist. You could say I got grandmothered into the profession. But besides being a genetic flaw in my family, it's taught me a lot. It taught me a lot because I've had the experience and the knowledge and the training as a scientist, getting a doctorate in molecular biology, but it was being a clinician that really was my deepest call. It's impressed me after my practice that cancer affects us at all deep levels. And that remarkable technology of science and medicine has made treatment of cancer remarkable, and the survival much more than what my grandmother could have. But really, the challenge that I have come to accept is that it affects the mental and the physical, the mental so much more than the physical, the spiritual, the mind, the heart, the spirit, much more. Bernie Siegel, that bald-headed, crazy surgeon who wrote Love, Medicine, and Miracles. I was privileged enough to be one of his mentoring classes as a young fellow. And Bernie used to say to us, you know, Bob, you need to teach them how to live between office visits. Because your biggest dragon is not the cancer. The biggest dragon is the fear of cancer. As an Army officer, I can tell you that I was taught to close with and defeat the enemy in battle. And as an oncologist, I was trained to fight and defeat cancer at any and all cost and to defeat death wherever it would rear its ugly head. But as I came to find out that winning that battle didn't take care of the suffering or the fear, and that survivorship was a lot like war. There really wasn't any winners. Everyone was touched deeply in that battle. And that survivorship was different than thriving. So I had to learn and develop a way of helping me develop a more holistic, compassionate, surreal way of helping my patients thrive. So Jeremy Giffen, who is an oncologist out east, wrote a very beautiful book. All these books are listed on my reference list. I cut and paste all these ideas. The universe has been kind enough to give them to me, but none of them are mine. And he came up with the 7 levels of healing. And he said, you know, there's 2 goals of medicine. There's an ultimate and a relative goal. I was taught the relative goal of medicine, to cure, to palliate, to treat pain, organic, chemistry, pharmacology. But in reality, it is a battle that I will always lose. Because as a biologist, I'm here to tell you that just like life happens, so does death. And vegans die, and athletes die, enlightened monks die, schmucks die. Probably not too fast. So if my goal of medicine as a doctor was always to win and to cure and to beat death, then, well, that's a bummer. And explains why burnout is so prevalent. But there's an ultimate goal of medicine. The ultimate goal I subject to you for your thought and reflection is to keep the car running and thriving so that the driver, the soul, can learn and do what it's been brought here to do. And that's enlightenment and love and compassion. So the ultimate goal of the physician is to help people heal, to help them heal spiritually, mentally, emotionally, leave a legacy. And just so happens in this world, we travel this world with a car, like think the BMW cars. BMW never sells cars that are standing still. You ever notice that? They always got a dude in it, and they're always driving down the highway. So I want to tell you a story. A story because it's myth and fairy tales that really teach us wisdom, truth. And this is a particular story that we all will know. But first off, let me just say this. What is a myth? What is a fairy tale? Because as a scientist with a PhD in molecular biology, I thought that was all beard scratching. I got to learn about the Krebs cycle. I don't got time to be young and all that craziness. The key is allegories are stories that have hidden meanings. And their synonym is the parable. And a parable is a fictional comparison between a spiritual or wisdom topic. So when the greatest parable teacher in Western rubric, Jesus of Nazareth, he used a lot of parables. And parables enable us to get beyond our left brain logic, our rational thought, and get into the right side intuitiveness. So we don't shelter that out. Of course, we all know that the prodigal son is a parable. But if he talked theologically, it would have taken about 5,000 pages, some bibliography, and it would have gone on for much of his life. But the parable just springs right home. So that is always been our maps, our guide, our road, right? Allegories, myths, fairy tales. What are some examples of such a thing? The book of Job, the Old Testament myth. I'm not even sure Job was a real person. It makes no difference. The story of Job is of righteous suffering, the heroic battle of a man done wrong. How about Charon, Asclepius, the great healing god that was wounded by Charon? All doctors know that myth. They're myths, they're stories. They tell us about how things happen. But in reality, Americans, Westerners, don't really have access to these myths, these stories. So it is with that great introduction that I'm going to sit down, because we're going to talk. We're just going to have a dialogue about this story. And it's a story that I love, because the father of osteopathic medicine, Andrew Taylor Still, was a contemporary of this man. His name is Frank Baum. And Frank Baum wrote a book, copyrighted in 1899, first published in 1900. And it is called The Wizard of Oz. And for all those you who know me, You know that I am fact, the great and all-powerful Oz. For those who really work with me, you know I'm more of the little fat bald guy behind the curtain. And for my children, I'm more like, well, Uncle Henry. But yes, I have been all of those because as a doctor and as a father and as a patient myself and someone afflicted with obsessive compulsive disorder, I have been to Oz and back several times. So osteopathic medicine is a Western alternative medicine that had three principles: that the body and the mind and the spirit are interconnected, that was done by purposeful of the great creator, and that our job as osteopathic physicians was to find health, not just disease. And finding health could be done naturally, internally, because we all had the power. So these two people were very important in my life when I was a young man. 1939, I'm not that old, but what happened in 1939? MGM Studios took over the book, made it a beautiful musical with, right, Julie Garland. Wild stuff. And every year for a long time, in the spring solstice, mind you, funny programming, but in the spring solstice, I would watch The Wizard of Oz for I don't know how many years. And I know all the songs, but we're not going to sing today. That would not be pleasant. So, those two stories are a little different. The book, of course, is no surprise, is a little different than the movie. The endings are different. Some of the colors and scripting has been done. So like all myth, like all fables, you need to take it, look it, and make it your own. So I will quote and jump back between the movie and the book, because it wasn't until I was 36 years of age that I actually read the original book. It's very odd that when you're running on your doctorate and in medical school that you would read that book, The Wizard of Oz. But it was a fascinating read and probably one of the best books I've ever read in medical school. So let's talk about this wizard thing. And I brought some friends. And basically, we're just going to tell the story. And Dorothy, you got to put your clothes on. So this is Dorothy. Dorothy Gale. Funny name for a girl from Kansas, Gale, seeing what happened to her. But Dorothy, she was a Kansas girl, but her parentage is unknown. She was an orphan. She was adopted by Uncle Henry and Auntie M. Like all great mythic characters, she really didn't have a real mom and dad. And so she had a dog, right? Dog was named. Now, I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, not Kansas, but that's just a river. And I will tell you that in my growing up in the Midwest, I've never seen a dog named Toto. I've seen Butch. I've seen Princess. I've seen Custer, which is my dog's name after George Armstrong Custer. I've never seen Toto. But nonetheless, Toto is her dog. Toto gets into a lot of trouble chasing cats, getting in trouble, biting the leg of a really prudy individual, Miss Gulch. And in the big storm, any of you in the Midwest, you know how eerie and dark it gets when tornadoes happen. It's a cyclone, by the way, odd, but cyclones are the big meteorological phenomena that tornadoes are a part of. But no Kansas boy would say, look, Joan, there's a cyclone coming. No, you say, there's a tornado coming, or a twister. Odd, but whatever. And the house gets ripped up because chasing her dog, they're not in the bomb shelter. Next thing she knows, bam, the house lands on a witch. They made a very famous musical about those witches, but I digress. So, bam, she lands on a witch. Then there's all these weird and wacky people, right? Munchkins. In fact, the funniest guys are the Chamber of Commerce dudes, you know? And they come in, they have this big-ass script. I don't know why they have a script. There's only 10 words in the whole speech. But anyway, she looks at Toto and says, man, we are not in Kansas anymore, right? Okay, then Glinda pops in, bam. Says, listen, Dorothy, you got to get the heck out of Dodge because the Wicked Witch of the West, she's going to be a little upset. And so she takes this big trip, right, on the yellow brick road, which isn't yellow in the book. But anyway, she's going to go see who? The great and all-powerful wizard, because he has the ability to get her out of Kansas. So off she goes. She finds 3 knuckleheads on the way, right? You can't make this up. I know Frank Baum said this was just a child's story, but I would have ended it different. But who's that? That's the Scarecrow, who my wife will tell you I most emulate. He had no brains. Then she's walking further, and there's another guy. And there's this guy, the Tin Man. And of course, he has no heart. Although it's hard to know how he rusted crying from a lost love if he had no heart, but okay, it's just a kid's story. And then in the forest, she happens to break into song, and they all sing in unison, mind you, because it's a musical, and lions and tigers and bears, and out pops this, a lion. So these 3 people, a guy with no brains, a guy with no heart, and a guy with no courage, they're going to help Dorothy get to see the Oz. Wow. So I don't have the great and all-powerful wizard because, well, I am it. And he's my most precious figurine. So, okay, so they get to the castle. A lot of shenanigans go on. They can't get through the gate. They get to the gate. There's a big old bubblehead guy with a green head, fires and everything. And he says to Dorothy, you got to prove yourself worthy. So you go and kill the Wicked Witch of the West and bring me her broomstick. And then I will see about granting your wish. Wham, out they go. Cut through it, get to the west side, right? Take care of the witch, grab the broomstick, off they go back to Oz. There's some more shenanigans about getting into Oz. Toto, that always clever little pup, figures out that this is all a sham, uncovers the great humbug. Then the great humbug himself helps them all get what they need. Dorothy's forlorn because she can't get back to Kansas. Wizard takes off in the balloon, like every male doctor I know. I'm done. See you later. And then Glinda comes and gets Dorothy back. Now, in the movie version, she wakes up because the really climatic injury, the catastrophic injury, was that she got knocked in the head and was in a coma. And she woke up in her bed with all of those people around it. And they said, oh, Dorothy, where have you been? And she told them about Oz. And they said, oh, Dorothy, you got a bump on your head. They didn't believe her. Nor would I. I have 4 kids, and they tell some crazy-ass stories, okay? But the book ends differently. The book actually ends Dorothy running through a prairie that we know not how she got there. And Auntie Em grabs her and says, where have you been, Dorothy? And Dorothy says, I've been in Oz. And the book ends. So that's the story, right? Kind of jives up with what we know about the movie and about the book. So I'll tell you what. So let's unpack this. Because I want to convince you, if I can, that this is not a simple child's story. That this is an allegorical, psychodynamic guide to self-healing. And this is how we'll do it. We're going to start off, and I'm going to unpack that whole story as I see it. This is just my interpretation, but the interpretation of Mark Barish and a lot of other guys who have come before me who have unpacked myth. Joseph Campbell, a famous mythologist, will tell you that the secrets of the Wizard of Oz have been encoded since time immaterial, because since time immaterial, we have had the human struggle, the human suffering. But each myth is only appropriate according to its time and language. But the hero or heroine's journey is as old as time. But it's just been revised, edited, new actors, different language. But the story. I am a maternal grandchild of a woman of Cherokee descent, and she told me some whoppers and some stuff. You see, I had two grandmothers. One was a paternal doctor and a scientist and an accomplished lady, and the other grandma was a Cherokee healer. And if that isn't a wild incarnation, I don't know what is. Very schizophrenic Thanksgivings are very exciting in my house. Anglo-Saxons came over 1638, stole it from the Indians. Indians are still there. They're not happy. Thanksgivings were more fun than the Super Bowl. So let's talk about this Wizard of Oz myth, this thing. Okay, now, I know that we're all afflicted in some way by cancer. Maybe it's another problem. Maybe we're caretakers. Okay? But I think we'll all get the meaning of the story. So, let's see. Let's take a drink. I learned this by Wayne Dyer. Anyone ever look at Wayne Dyer? I'm like, why is that dude sitting down all the time? Because he's old. Okay, so let's start off and unpack this. Okay, well, let's say Dorothy. Okay, little Dorothy, Dorothy Gale. The world to Dorothy is so bland, it's black and white. It's monotonous. They show you, have you ever been to Kansas? There ain't nothing going on in Kansas. It's just black, dull, and monotonous. And she's the only cheery, rosary thing in the whole field. And that's her everyday life. But she has a little dog called, Toto. And Toto is a rambunctious thing and gets in some trouble into a garden eating some cabbages of Mrs. Gulch. Actually bites her on the leg. And Miss Gulch says, I'm going to get your dog. In fact, I'm going to put your dog down because it not only ate my cabbages, but it bit me on the leg. And so one of the great scenes is she says, I'll get you and your little dog Toto too, right? Well, Miss Gulch is Margaret Mead, and she also played the Wicked Witches, a forecasting of things to come. But the dog, of course, couldn't be contained. It got out of the basket and went running everywhere. And I would tell you that we all have Dorothy lives. She is the mythic hero or heroine. And her little dog, which throughout the story is always her intuitive guide. Toto is always the one picking the right path, doing the right thing, biting the right people on the leg. And Toto is the one who messed up and got her to hit that cyclone. Well, here's the deal. If you went to see a Jungian psychologist or a psychotherapist, he would tell you that if you had a dream, and that dream had a tornado or a cyclone in it, you should pay attention to that dream because it's a transformational event. And the cyclone in Dorothy's life was a chaotic, really in-your-face, wow, bam. And how many of us have had that experience? See, my daughter was healthy and wealthy and very cute up until the time that I wanted to know why her joints were so stiff. And then the minute the rheumatologist came in and said that she had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, bam, that was a cyclone. Bob, we are no longer in Kansas. Now I am the father of a critically ill daughter. This is not Kansas anymore. And it is not dull, and it is not gray. And life doesn't go on. And in this Oz, everyone looks a little different. They have different costumes. They speak different, right? It's a complete different culture and a completely different dialect. And when you're diagnosed, we put you where? In a different land. Maybe the land of the sick, maybe the land of the handicapped. We put you in clinics and cultures and institutions, and the doctors and the nurses and the MAs and everyone, they speak a different language, using very big and crazy-ass words. And you know, you're not in Kansas anymore. But what is all that Dorothy wants to do? Just get back home. And I would tell you that that's all patients ever tell me. I just want to be real. I just want to be healthy. I just want to be well. I just want to get back to home. What doesn't come up is there's an implied I want my cancer to go away. There's an implied I don't want to have pain. But in reality, it's deeper than that. It's buried, right? Well, it happens to be 3 witches. There's actually 4 in the book, but one of them has no name. So we have 3. We have the East, the West, and we have the nurse, the South nurse witch, who doesn't have a name, and Glinda of the North, right? Okay. Witch, nurse, yeah. Yeah, well, we have more Mrs. Gulches at Kaiser, too, okay? So the key is that what would be the Wicked Witch? Well, if you look at a map of Oz in this book, it looks a lot like Kansas. And there's an east and a west, and there's a middle. She lands in the east. And the funny thing is the Munchkins in the east all wear blue. And she kills a witch, a sister of the west. Well, in Roman Catholic churches, the altars always point east, because that is the rising sun. The Jesus, the rising sun, the morning star. East is a spiritual, metaphysical direction. And what you have to know about Frank Baum is that he was a Rosicrucian. He was a type of Gnostic Christian. He had written articles about mystical Christian sects. Just buried the symbolism. Now, Oz is green. And not only is the color green, but everyone wore green glasses to make it even more green. And the West, everyone wears red. And the rainbow, of course, has 7 layers of color, does it not? And the order of the coloring goes red, orange, yellow, green, violet. It's Roy G. Biv, the electromagnetic spectrum. Blue is also the color of depression, loneliness, chaos, confusion, isolation. Funny. So who would be the Wicked Witch of the East? Denial, maybe? Promise of a future life? Who knows? But that Wicked Witch got killed and slaughtered. Now we've gained access to Oz. And now we're going to go to the wizard who lives in green, the balancing, the holistic. When we talk about holistic medicine, we talk about it being green. Why? It's the balancing of electromagnetic radiations between red and violet. Funny color, but okay, we'll take it. It's just a kid's story, by the way. And no one's ever seen the all-powerful Oz, because the sidebar of the story, is that he's just a Kansas boy. Remember? We saw Professor Marvel when Dorothy was running away. And he was a snake salesman. He was a fake, a charlatan, right? Well, it turns out that the story is that he landed in Oz, not being able to control that crazy balloon, and he had such a fear of the wicked witches who had true power that he locked himself, convinced the Munchkins that he had power that he did not possess, and hid himself in Oz. I tell you that in my own life, the Wicked Witch of the East is a future and a life without suffering, and a new birth in a pristine way, and a denial that life is free of suffering. And when I killed that witch, by accident, mind you, because I never would have engaged in any kind of battle, I had to journey. And so the West is a whole different. I will tell you the West is fear. Because death or the shadow or the night, they're all fear. So remember Dorothy sitting there and the Munchkins are singing, carrying on, having a party because the Wicked Witch had kept them all in subjugation. But Glinda showed up, and what did Glinda say to the Wicked Witch of the West when she showed up to get not the ruby slippers? That just was looking good in Hollywood. It turns out they're silver, and that has a very spiritual color, silver. But anyway, Glinda says, oh, go away. You have no power here. Was it because fear, the Wicked Witch, really had no power? Or she had no power over someone with the slippers? We're left to ponder. But the Wicked Witch of the West knows that something powerful has happened. And she needs those slippers. And off she goes. So they go and they travel to the great and all-powerful Oz. And by the way, they don't just take a path. They actually take a labyrinth. A spiral, just like the chakra system. And then they fling out of town. No one asks the Munchkins what the heck they got that thing going, but it is. And they get to the Oz, and in chapter 10, and this is not hidden from anyone's view, chapter 10, the guardian of the gate. It wasn't the doorman, the sentry, right? It's the guardian of the gate. And that's a very spiritual transformation event. And the Guardian, of course, is played by the same dude that played Professor Marvel. And he opens it, and what does he say? No one gets to see the wizard, not nobody, not know how. Well, that's kind of crazy, because that's a double negative. Nobody sees the wizard. Not nobody. Not nobody is somebody. Not know how. Not know how is how. And so how does Dorothy? Not by force. You don't take the kingdom by force. You show tears and humbleness, bowing down before the suffering. And that's how she gains entrance to Oz. And the great bubblehead, I will tell you, is the medical citadels. When I was at Madigan, we had the old Madigan. And the waits in the pharmacy line were hours and hours and hours. It was old. And we built the new Madigan. And I went up there to get a prescription about 1 week into Madigan's new opening. And I'm sitting behind this old guy. And we're waiting the same 45 minutes. I said, so dude, how do you like the new Madigan? He says, I love it. It's a beautiful thing. And I said, you know, we're waiting in line the same amount. They just took the same people up the hill. Oh, no, you're wrong. This is beautiful. Why? Because Madigan was a healing temple. A beautiful emerald gold healing where places people went to heal. Culture and environment and sociological factors always play a part in healing. And so she had a task. So how about her three characters? Well, the Scarecrow, for a guy who was so dumb, he figured everything out. He figured out how to get off the pole. And he was so disappointed. Why? Because he couldn't scare crows. And he couldn't scare Toto. Because here's the deal. Facts and thoughts, they don't conquer worries and fear. You can't intellectualize the healing path. But the funny thing is when he gets to the Oz, and the Oz grants him his brain, he grants him the title of Thinkology. Universitatis Comitatium e Pluribus Unum. The Latin is the universal committee out of the many, the one. That's not the University of Kansas model, by the way. E pluribus unum is the unofficial model of the United States. Out of the many, one. Funny thing to tell a man with a lot of crazy thoughts. And oh, by the way, he wasn't that smart. He completely misquotes the Pythagorean theorem. He wasn't that smart. But anyway, he just did think he was. So he actualized it. And same way with the Tin Man. He got what was missing in his life, a heart, love. Hearts are never practical until they can be designed not to be broken. And of course, they're always broken, right? And of course, the lion was the most courageous. It was the lion who defended, got them into the castle, and did all these heroic things because he had confused courage with wisdom. And that courage isn't running away. It's knowing which battles to fight and fighting anyway. So they all needed those broken, fragmented senses to come together. And they were all what they call archetypes. They were all part of the love and the wisdom and the courage that Dorothy needed to actualize, to own, to draw upon, so that she could be healed. And the Oz, well, the Oz is a funny story, and I'll tell you a little doctor story next time you're seeing your doctor. It's a little secret. We all would like to be the great and all-powerful Oz, because technology is what we love to hide behind. Because the thought and the emotions that we really are just humbug, that we are so fearful of the powers of life and death, of good and right and wrong, that we hide behind the thing that we can control. But what made us great healers is that shadow side, the broken side, the simple guy from Kansas, who can give each of those broken parts what they needed to heal, right? So that is kind of the characters. And the Wicked Witch, she was destroyed how? Well, they threw water on her. They threw water on her because she threw fire at the Scarecrow. And out of kindness and out of self-effacing service, Dorothy threw water on the great witch. And water is a funny thing. Water is also a spiritual tool of cleansing consciousness. Funny. You could have killed the witch anyway. It's just a story. Okay? So then she gets back. Get back to Oz. And they all get their part. And they're all happy. But Dorothy is going to take the balloon ride with the great and all-powerful Oz. That dude's out of there. He's getting back to Kansas. But Toto takes off after another cat. I mean, what's the heck with that dog? I would have jumped in the balloon, left the dog away. You can buy another dog. But she takes off after Toto because Toto's her intuitive sense, her guide. And the balloon takes off. Why? Because her intuitive side knew that she shouldn't get in that balloon. Because, see, the balloon was done by another person. It was still under the power of medicine, of external forces. They thought they could get Dorothy back home. But they can't control the balloon any more than I can. So then what happens? Well, Glinda shows up. And this very paraphrased dialogue, Dorothy says, "Can you help me? Can you help me?" And Glinda says, "Oh, darling, you don't need help anymore." And Dorothy says, "Why?" And Glinda says, "You have the power, and you've always had the power within you to get yourself back home." And the Scarecrow, the smart ass that he's become, because he has all these brains, says, "Well, why didn't you tell her before, knucklehead?" And Glinda says, "Because she never would have believed me." She had to do that journey. She had to learn to own the broken parts of herself. And she had to learn that in fact the power, Dorothy, is always within you. So clip your heel 3 times, the silver slippers, 1, 2, 3, the Tritarian symbol, and boom, she was back, right? Now Dorothy goes back. Dorothy goes back a lot to Oz. That's not the first. But that's the myth. I believe in my experience as a doctor, it's true on many levels. It's true literally, and metaphysically. It's true as a healing that I've done, and it's true in my life as a physician. Because I have patients who have been cured for 10 years, 15 years, or they're doing well in between office visits. And the minute that they have to go to Oz and hit the door and say, I need to see the great and all-powerful Oz, all the matter they are fearful that I will find something, that their CT will find something. But fear has no power. We make the reality. That's not to say that cancer is not real. In this dimension, it is very real. It is a cyclone. It is a tornado. It is a thing that forces us to walk the narrow path of suffering. But Glinda had it right. You have no real power here. Cancer can't take away your optimism, your compassion, your commitment, your connection. It has no power. The Wicked Witch of the West has no power. No real power anyway. And I will tell you that you can use that cyclone, that tornado, as a spiritual healing event if you have the love and the wisdom and the courage to do that. So what would be the tools? What would be the technique? How would we take this myth, this story, and make it real? So one of the books on your list is by Austin in Houston. And she is a brilliant transpersonal psychologist. She talks about guided imageries and kind of creative affirmations and things that you could do such work. So this work usually is called everything from meditations, affirmations, mindfulness, the shadow work, the dark side, places that guys like me, when I started doing this work, I married my therapist. She's a psych nurse. It was a lot cheaper. I don't recommend that you marry your therapist, just a sidebar. But my shadow side was so dark and scary that I just didn't want to go in there alone. So I needed a guide. So it became clear to me, being raised by an oncologist grandmother, that this was going to be one big-ass you-know-what storm, and that I had a lot of issues and that I needed therapy. So very early in my medical school career, I did therapy to find out why I wanted to be a doctor. Really, well, why would anyone be a doctor? The money's not that great. So I had to uncover that. I had to uncover what my compassion, what was my goal? Why was I a healer? Why was I in Oz in the first place? Okay? And was I able to sit there and not be the big-ass bobblehead? In fact, in my den, there is a lithograph of the original MGM thing with Total pulling the curtain. And on our 20th year wedding anniversary, my wife got me that with this inscription: "Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain." That's the story of my professional life. So what could we do? Well, we could do formal work, but here's the end of the story about how does this do with mindfulness? What does that have to do with mindfulness? Because here is the thing. We talk about today the healing of the mind, not the healing of the body. Of course, the two are linked, and they're important. When I drive my BMW down I-5 from Longview, going 85, 90,000 miles an hour, so much so that the State Patrol just have my credit card on file, and they send me a bill every month. I said, yeah, I probably was doing that. I love driving that car. Now, one day the car is going to be done and rusted, broken, and I'm going to have to give the car up. But I make no pretense that it's just a car, and this is just a body. Not a sexy, great, sleeky model like the BMW, but it's my body. And it gets me through this world pretty good. But really, the essence of my life is my mind and paying attention to our mind. See, thoughts, beliefs, meaning, love, wisdom, and courage. That's the healing force, the power of love. Do we envision a world where we could let go of fear? Oh, many prophets and avatars have come and have told us, fear not, for I have overcome the world, and I grant you the peace that passes all understanding. Wow, what was that? I give you the peace that passes left brain understanding. I give you a world without fear, because you make fear. I make fear. But that's some serious work. That's some dark jungles and some trees throwing apples at you, okay? And the poppy field, which I think was pretty cool with the Marijuana Act, that it would be a poppy field. And then that is heavy work. Don't go in there alone. So that's community, survivorship, that's therapy. But mindfulness, paying attention to our thoughts, because our thoughts change our reality. Maybe not organically, although I will tell you that spontaneous remissions, holistic health can prove that those things are absolutely wired. Harvard Mind-Body Institute, Dr. Herbert Benson, published 1.5 years ago that when cancer patients learn to meditate, mindfulness, that they change the genetic expression of several known oncogenes. Let me say that again. A mindfulness-based meditative tool changing the attention of your thoughts changes the genetic expression of things. And I have no idea what the heck that means. I do know as a scientist, that's wild. I can sit in my room at dawn and pay attention to my breathing and my thoughts and let go of those fearful thoughts, commute with the essence of that wizard inside me, and that changes my health. My blood pressure, my cortisol level, and maybe even my genes. But I'll tell you one thing, as a kid with obsessive compulsive disease, and oh, by the way, attention deficit disorder, if you just haven't figured that out, which is in partial remission, by the way. I learned to meditate as a child to get control of my mind. That my mind was like a monkey mind, and it was running all crazy. And sometimes at work, I have my own anti-M's, and I have my own Glindas, and I have my own people who show up to center me and get me calm, right? We all need them. So mindfulness-based, paying attention to our thoughts. Do you feel that you really deserve healing? The wizard said that point blank. You must prove yourself worthy to heal. How would we ever dare have anyone say that to us? But those munchkins and those winged monkeys, I love the winged monkeys. They look a lot like Russian imperial soldiers. But anyway, they're all part of us. Oh, I have my winged monkeys. Okay, those little things that says, Bob, you're an idiot, or you're not smart enough, or you're not kind enough, or you're not courageous enough, right? We all have the winged monkeys. So you have to deal with them. It's just a lot of work, but it's powerful work. So I am a physician. I treat cancer in its organic manifestation. But I do that just for one reason, so that you will have the time to do the work that you have been called to do, the heroic, heroine, mythic healing work that human beings alone do. See, there's two domains. We walk two domains: being and doing. Dorothy went back to Oz as a citizen of two domains. Oh, in the home? Yeah, which was her home? Oz or Kansas? Or both? Because human beings are ensouled organic beings. We share organic chemistry, physiological, and other things with animals and plants and even higher vertebrates. But we have a special tacked-on activated feature, this I-ness, this ability to transcend our own personal needs and suffering, to live outside of our genetic programming. In fact, that's why I think disease runs so gamut. My dog doesn't overeat. My dog don't eat bacon bowls unless I give it to him, and he says, man, I ain't eating that bacon bowl. I'll get sick. But I'll eat a bacon bowl because why? My gene's saying, listen, dude, you're going to die. And I'm like, that's 20 years down. We can overcome. So we have a whole bunch of diseases of affluence, diseases of overexcess, because we have the ability to overdo our genetic programming, our I-ness. So human being in doing. So I'll end and get a conclusion right now because I want to answer some of your questions if you have any. If not, then I'm taking a break. But one thing is this. I had a very wise teacher, Dr. Harold Tarabello, when I was a senior medical student. And we had a very, very sick patient, and she was dying of breast cancer. And it was clear to everyone that she was dying, but not this third-year medical student. So I did her chemistry and found out that her sodium was all whacked out, and so I decided overnight I would fix her chemistry, and of course she woke up into great pain and suffering. And Howard showed up and said, Bob, what did you do? I said, well, she was hyponatremic and hypercalcemic, and I changed all that with hydration and all that, and look. He says, yeah, look, what in the heck were you doing? You always have to ask the question, what the hell do you think you're doing? And if you can't answer that in a very clear, succinct sixth grade way, then you probably should not be doing it. So when I became a hospice doctor, I learned that that was the number one mantra. Oh, just don't do anything, Bob. Just sit there and just watch. Just be a spiritual guide, to be a companion in that. So we work two domains, being and doing. So mindfulness is taking the time, the honor, the privilege, and the responsibility to set aside that time. Because just as food is medicine, powerful medicine, being is a real therapeutic healing. Having communion, giving love, servicing others is a positive healing force. It is truly the most powerful force in the universe. So what are the lessons? What are the lessons? I'll make them three. What the heck? It's just the way that we're going to end it. One, the power is always within you. Oh, Dorothy, you always had the power within you. But we have to own it. And we have to learn it ourselves. No one can heal for us. No one can do that work for us. But it takes love, wisdom, and it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage. Two, witches and winged monkeys and castles and that big bobblehead green monster dude of the wizard, they're bad. But they're not necessarily evil. And they can be the catalyst for healing if we use them. Because I believe that there are lessons that we are here to learn, and if we do not learn them, we will have to do it again in summer school. The Course in Miracles says that much. The lessons here are not optional, only their timing is. And the third thing is, I will tell you that, like Glenda said, living between appointments, living if you're cured, living if you're not cured, is a state of mind. And letting go of fear is a domain of love. And it is a simple reality, but it is very hard work. So when you find yourself in Oz, right? Take those three knuckleheads, find which one of them need love and guidance, fix the bad winged mustards, and the winged monkeys love Dorothy after they knocked off the witch, and then get yourself back home. Because our true home actually is not a place. Our true home is here within us and around us. And no one can take our home away. Not cancer, not terrorists, not hypertension, autoimmune disease, or even death. Because our home transcends that. And that's my little drug-induced talk about Wizard of Oz. So I'd be happy to take your questions. Thank you. Please address the life connection, the flickering of Fight for Life and the Great Oz. Who wrote that? Please address the life connections of the Fight for Life and the Great Oz. Well, I'll try. If I'm not right, I'll see. You know, we have this struggle. This struggle between what is known and what is unknown, what we can be sure of. So I live in a world of facts. Things I can see with my senses and the extensions of my senses. So as a scientist, I use microscopes, and I dissected ever-growing fragments of reality, and then I tried to extrapolate. It's very comfortable as a physician to lower blood pressure, to shrink tumors. But patients usually ask me, if I say there's a 35% response rate, the first follow-up question should be, yeah, what does that mean? Am I going to live longer? Am I going to have a better survival? So we, in medicine, we don't have those penultimate questions, those existential questions. Because when we change something, we forever change a change of chaos and craziness. So we substitute goals for what I can answer. Because I'm supposed to be an expert, right? I'm supposed to be the great and all-powerful Oz that can get everyone back to Kansas. And so there's a dynamicism between fighting for your life, your body life. A guy named Maslow figured this out. He says, you know, we're all very interestingly crazy beings. For people to do spiritual work or this mindfulness or this work, they do have to be not starving, and they have to be in relatively good health or they can't do that other work. So when, as a physician, I found myself in that rabbit hole, another myth. When I started to do therapy, when I started to read The Wizard, when my daughter was so critically ill and I found out that it was all a facade, it was all a game, and that the true work of myself as a wizard was to bring my scientific knowledge and my skill as a clinician to bear so that I could help the burden, the physical suffering of those patients so that then they could be open to that work. And that I would then, as a guardian of the gate, would let them in so that they could do that work. But I will tell you, as an oncologist, that was a very hard time for me. Politically, financially, and all that, because I fell down the rabbit hole. Because when you stop fighting cancer, when the war on cancer was no more fruitful than the war on Vietnam, we chose the wrong enemy. See, the battle of cancer is from within. It's just our bodies have gone amok. And metabolically and genetically, it is a change in something that should be a beautifully orchestrated garden and has turned into a big-ass weed in the middle of it. But weeding with ripping and towing and pouring insecticides in it is not the only way to garden. Changing the soil and giving it oxygen. Now, I will admit to you that in the Super Bowl, that's how I weed. I pull up the weed, the wife doesn't see nothing, I run in. But I know in 2 or 3 weeks, the weeds will be back. So there is and that's why doctors often will be amazed and have the vision and then retreat back to the temple of healing, because the vision they don't know how to balance. Because you're open, you're receptive, you're weak. You're not the expert. I'm not the expert in any of your diseases or illnesses or cancers. Why? Because although I could tell you they share genetics and they share certain phenotypic types of things, the cancers that you have, the illnesses you have never before been seen in this physical world because they happen to you. They're your disease. Homeopathic and osteopath. We don't practice big templated jack-in-the-box medicine because we know what works for healing in an individual is unique to that individual. So it is a crisis and a war in my heart and my mind all the time between what are my allegiances and what do people want me to do. And sometimes I get caught, and sometimes I don't. But in my great patient and kind ways, I do both. I work on the physical disease and then send my patients to the professionals that can do that. Because when I was a doctor, I wasn't going to see no shrinks or crazy people. So I do a hard touch. I say, listen, we got to get your mind in the game here, and I need you to see a meditation teacher or a mindful teacher or something. And then I let that work be done by other wizards who are more powerful and great. But no longer am I fear of the death. No, I'm feared of not connecting with my patients. I fear not getting to know them as people, as husbands and wives and daughters, and being able to tell them that maybe they only have 3 or 4 months left of quality survival, and that maybe they need to stop fighting the disease so that they can start loving and leaving their family, because maybe the trip and the balloon are leaving. And I know that. I'm like the 2-minute drill. Anyone see 2-minute drill back in the 60s? It's like sometimes I'm the 2-minute drill guy. 2 minutes, like a football game. I see a lot of people struggling in that. But it's hard to struggle and fight and love at the same time. Cancer is a dragon. It's a bad dragon. But there's a balance between yin and yang of pushing and pulling. So could you learn to love your cancer? Could you learn to walk with it, to journey with it, to listen to what it has to teach you? And then maybe, and a lot of times this is true in psychosocial oncology literature, that when that work's done, sometimes there's been really strange medical things that have happened. And I've seen it enough times to understand that there is a power. The psychoneuroimmunology, you can call it mind over medicine, you can do whatever you want. But statistically, I can tell you that as long as we are in the fight, our cortisol level, our stress, we're hunkered down and we're this. And we are never going to be able to love our broken self and our broken body. The part of the hardest work was my daughter with an autoimmune disease coming to love the fact that her body rejected herself. Because that's what autoimmune disease is metaphysically. How could your body ever not love you? And how could your body just reject itself? How could cancer grow in my beautiful garden? These are deep, probing questions, and I do not have your answers for you. I am not the expert. But I am the guardian of the gate, and I can tell you that if you do that work with wisdom and love and courage, that you will get back home, and you will live and thrive, no matter what your body happens to be doing, right? Yeah, that was probably 20 minutes. I hope I got that to the gist of that. Okay, is there anything else? Yes, ma'am.
No, I love your story, but the slippers were ruby red, not silver.
Only in the film. In the book, they were silver.
Really, why?
Because the silver cord is the biblical cord that ties us to the heavenly gate. Also, in Hindu, Muslim spirituality, the silver cord is the cord which spiritual adepts can use to get themselves out of in this incarnation. So the silver cord is a very specific metaphysical terminology. MGM made them ruby red so it could fit the Technicolor processing of their film. But in the book, they are silver. In the book, it is not a yellow brick road. It is a golden. The golden path is the hero's journey. And that's why many people at the time of Frank Baum writing his story felt that it was an allegory of economy. So if you go home and you look at the allegorical meaning of The Wizard of Oz, the biggest hits will be that they felt that Frank Baum was criticizing the economics in the capitalistic society at the turn of the century. They took the gold road and the wizard being bankers, and there's a beautiful, because allegories can have multiple layers of meanings. I don't know. Frank Baum and his grandchildren say it's just a child's story, but I'll leave you with this one quote. It doesn't matter. Our collective unconscious channels these things through. Carl Jung, the great Swedish psychotherapist, above his home, he has the Latin. It stands vocatus ad quo, non vocatus ad dalet, Deus aduet. And that stands for invoked or not, God is present. And the collective unconscious will use us to make its meanings known. So sometimes you say the right thing, you're in the right place, and it touches someone, and that is the collective unconscious reaching out and healing us, because we're all connected. We are all absolutely part of the many comes the one. E pluribus unum. And that's what the wizard finally says as I'm going to say goodbye. And in the balloon, when he's riding off, he says, "I return to e pluribus unum." So I return to the land where the many have always become the one. And we are all the one, right? May you all have peace and well-being, and may I never, ever, ever have the chance to see you in my healing temple of Oz. Thank you.